So when parents apply to our school, they often say they would like their child to be a good human being by the end of the journey, at the end of the road, and that's a very fascinating topic because in our educational context, yeah, it's loaded with the term good student, good human being. So let's unpack that and look at different facets of the notion of goodness.
Yeah, but just before we begin, I'm wondering, in this very contemporary age, goodness seems like a very old-fashioned topic, right? Like, it seems a bit like old-fashioned to talk about goodness. We can discuss more specific things like kindness or generosity or empathy or something. Goodness seems like an abstract layer we are adding onto real life. And also, I mean, in discussion with people, we often hear the idea that good and bad are just relative human concepts, right? Nothing in nature that is good or bad. Somehow, the specific goodness topic brings out this masala feeling of, oh, it is all relative and there's nothing really concrete about it. So it's paradoxical. I feel we ought to discuss it, and I also feel there may be some question around it. But at the same time, I feel it's a felt need from parents and educators. Like, I can't imagine a parent saying, it's okay for my child to grow up and be destructive to others or to herself or whatever. So, it is a real felt need, I think, and for that reason, we can go into it.
You said that it's old fashioned and maybe it's even a concept, but I'm wondering if we can stay with that question for a while. Because after all, many cultures, through the ages have been interested in a philosophical investigation, looking at goodness together. And like Kirti said, when parents write to us, I too wonder what they mean when they say, I want my child to just be a good human being. Be interesting to stay with that for a while and go into it, right?
Yeah.
So one thing might be when parents or even educators say good human being, they might mean we want the child to have the right values, like they want to be respectful to elders or be hardworking, be polite, be honest. And this has to do with the sense of social morality that we are all growing up with. So that could be one place to start.
Yeah, also like a good political citizen. So in your country, you are a critical thinker. You have liberal views. You're a responsible citizen. It would also add that layer, no? Yeah.
Or being successful, being respectable in society, or having the feeling of giving back to society. And I'm just thinking, even in our school, we may all have a certain picture of what a good CFL student is, right? Somebody who's looking out for the others and not just themselves, who's participating in community tasks involved in the community, being responsible. And all of these may be in some way tied to certain values that we hold as a group.
So as we're going around, we're listing properties and habits of goodness, right? So I'm just wondering, can we ask ourselves if goodness lies elsewhere and not just in behavioral performance, in a sense that it's just a picture or a list of actions, no?
I
Yeah.
think I understand, but can you go more into it and say what you mean?
Yeah. Yeah, so is goodness just about cultivating properties, or could it be more of an attitude or a response to the world around me? And it's ongoing. On a daily basis, I do need to take into account someone else's motivations, feelings, and then my own, and respond to it in a situation or a incident. So is it more like a process, ongoing process, like a verb almost, not a noun as a fixed entity of goodness to try to achieve? So, I mean, we're all watching how people are motivated by similar feelings and thoughts, right? So, taking all that into account and understanding why someone did what they did, then responding to that, that feels more like an appropriate response, or maybe even good in a sense. And actually, in that sense, we can't predict how my action will be. So it's not fixed actually, right? It's not a list of qualities. It could be what I do, or how I respond. Yeah.
So, Kitty, you're saying that if one is alert to what's happening inside us in some ways and paying attention to what's happening around us,
Yeah.
uh, then the actions that emerge out of that, or all that unfolds out of that, may be a way of responding to life. Is that what you're saying?
It's also an awareness of my conditioning. That's what I mean, I think.
Yeah.
That I'm, yeah. So,
So
again,
I'm
not looking
wondering-
at the outward only, but an awareness of my conditioning and then responding to life. That's what, yeah.
So I'm wondering, what if instead of wanting to be good, it feels like we're adding another layer to something. So instead of doing that, I'm wondering if we just look at what's happening within us and stay with that. Is that of value? Because it feels like it's possible to look at what's happening in a given moment, and that may in fact reduce the struggle that we seem to have with meeting a certain picture of goodness. It may reduce that.
Yeah, so it's not a narrative we tell ourselves. This is, if I do this, this means I'm a good human being, and this is who I am. It's not a voice like that. It's also not something we can enforce in a space like this, or a practice we can expect. Yeah, so maybe it doesn't have an evaluative quality to it at all. That's my sense.
So you're talking about an inner awareness. So that could also become part of a list that you talked about earlier. I guess I hear you were saying that it's not a part of that list because it's more dynamic and alive and in touch with what is happening. It's not one more picture or label to stick on to somebody. That's what I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. Also, there's one very strong implication from what both of you are saying, that there are no good or bad people, and there are just a series of attitudes and emotions and actions that are playing out in life, and maybe there's some awareness of these. Now, this is a bit controversial because immediately even I will feel, wait a minute, wasn't Hitler a really bad person, and wasn't Gandhi a really good person? I mean, that's how the mind formulates the problem. Yeah, so that's a very complex topic. But just to suggest that maybe we are not like solid rocks or mountains clashing into each other through life, but more like clouds or weather systems. We are drifting through life, and attitudes are drifting through us, and maybe there can be an awareness of this, is what I'm hearing both of you say.
Right.
Yeah, many philosophers have suggested this.
Yeah, and as you're saying all that, Venkat, I'm thinking of what we do here in school. So here, all the adults and children come together to talk about various aspects of our life, right? And there may be questions that we bring, and when we come to it, it's with a certain curiosity to find out or to look at our thoughts and actions, to go into a certain question. There is a certain exploration that happens through conversations. So let's say we're talking about goodness in one such conversation. I think it's possible to look at it without creating in the process or at the end of it a picture that we have about uh, goodness, right? It's possible to go into it without having a picture. if I feel like if we don't do that, and if we go into that space that we have for conversation with an attitude of identifying all the features that can match my idea of goodness, then at the end of it, it's likely that I'll end up with a good versus bad list, right? And that doesn't seem to contribute to any kind of learning,
Understanding.
understanding or learning. How will we learn about it if it's already categorized? And if we look at the way we live our daily lives, if we pay attention to that, then it seems like it's not so black and white. If I think of what goodness means, and it's not so clear that this particular thing is good and this particular thing is bad. So given that it's not so black and white, coming up with a list like that or having a fixed framework also doesn't seem to make sense, right?
Yeah, it's quite complex actually. So, just for our listeners to share how in school we structure these conversations that Rupa was mentioning. Every week, each group in school has something called a dialogue class or dialogue space, and it's with their class teacher and another teacher. Yeah, so that's a space to unpack something that has happened, perhaps someone feeling hurt, or group habits like commenting on each other, or incidents like bullying, taking things or stealing. Yeah. Within the community, some forces are playing out, and we bring them to the dialogue space. Even students can bring something up, and in that, I guess it's an unfolding of all these factors that you said. It's not to arrive at a conclusion by the end and say, so this either this person or is bad or good, but it's more of what all went in, what are the complexities that went into that situation, and then how shall we move forward. Yeah, so recently this topic of commenting on others, the need to judge others constantly, that came up from a student, and from that, the next question was, what pushes each of us to comment and judge others? And slowly exposed our motivations, our fears, actually what's behind those comments. So exploration shows the depth from which we are acting every day, and it's a kind of an understanding that unfolds rather than arriving at a punishment or a conclusion of what what to consequent in a way. So
So there are clearly certain factors in the way we are set up that's allowing for an exploration of this kind, right? I can think of certain aspects that we have in our structure, like we don't have competition, we don't have rewards, punishments, we don't put children through contests that judge them and reward them for their skills or their talents. Even our sports program will not make use of competition to simply to motivate children to play. Surely this will have an impact on the way we relate with one another, the way we learn about ourselves.
Yeah, definitely. There is, I mean, it's not that people here are not competitive. Students and adults are competitive. There seems to be that force, but we are not structurally reinforcing it, because when we do that, I think the sense of competition kind of narrows our energies in a very, very focused way, and then we lose that capacity to relax, to step back, to look at who we are at that moment, right, and what our place is in a wider process. We lose that capacity. So I think what you said is very important. Sorry, just to jump and then we'll come back. I think, when I'm listening to us talking, we are talking a lot about open-ended exploration and all. Just a caution that culturally, intellectually now in society, I think it's quite fashionable to say, oh, everything depends on your point of view. and there's nothing real. It's all just you want to make up your point of view about goodness in this way or that way, then you should do that, and we should all respect that. I actually don't think that's what we are suggesting. There is something real to explore about the ways in which human beings function, all of us, right? There's something tangible and there's something common in all of us. So it's not just a matter of making up your own opinion in this exploration. Sorry, just to come back to that competition point, yeah, it's very important to structurally remove competition, yeah.
So, just to describe what we do have, on the contrary, is a small community of only 70 students and 20 adults, and it's residential. So, yeah, it's quite an intense web of working together and getting things done, tasks done. But in the middle of that, trying to understand how to be sensitive to everyone's needs in a sense and relate to each other. So that is almost like a ground for nurturing goodness or this kind of response to what's happening. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting because in the community, everyone knows everyone else in some way, and yeah, we have to come together in groups to maybe take care of the kitchen or waste, manage our waste on campus, for instance. Many tasks, and it makes sense to cooperate, get it done. Um, yeah, so it's a bubble. It's in a sense a space from which we feel certain ways of being can come. And I don't know if I'd call it goodness, but that's it. Yeah.
So it's true, Kirti, that in a small community like ours, we need to all work cooperatively so that we can function well, live together. But I'm wondering, as we go about our daily tasks, there may be many times, many instances when you can see there's a tussle between fulfilling my own individual need and that of the community. You can see how it reveals itself, and given that we are a small community, actually it's because we live together and ours is a small community, it even shows up. And I feel like there's a lot of learning that can happen just by looking at that, because in a community, if I can see that if one is looking out only for oneself, then the effect of that is felt by the entire community, right? It's quite visible, it's possible
Obvious, it
to
becomes
look
obvious.
at
Okay,
it.
right.
I'm wondering if when one is self-centered, your mind space is fully taken up by oneself, right? There's no space for anything else to come into view. It's very narrow, like you said. There's possibly no glimpse into the vastness that exists or the relatedness that exists between us, right? There's no space for that. Seems to block some kind of awareness, and what we talked about just now about responding in the moment may not be possible if it's blocking that kind of awareness, right? Now that can't actually become another goal that we're going after, that now one needs to be not self-centered. But I am curious about what happens when we preserve this energy of just looking, just observing what's unfolding.
No, it's a very vast and, like you said, wonderful question what you're asking. Can we human beings look at our self-centeredness? It also has a very sad and sorrowful underside, because society is based on the idea that we should all look out for ourselves, and if not ourselves, then we identify with the group and then we push for the aims of that group. And of course there are social groups that are suffering tremendously and going through all kinds of oppression, and then to say no, you must not push for your aims, I mean, that feels like terrible. But at the same time, there is something interesting in this whole question that you're opening up, that society as it is structured today, maybe because many people and groups are just pushing and we are not able to see something bigger about relatedness, like you're saying.
Yeah, just to add, I feel like if each individual and each social group, if each of us is going after a certain ambition, going after success, and we know that success is defined in certain ways now, right? It's to do with wealth or status or the power that you hold. It's actually, we shouldn't be surprised that there's conflict
So much,
in
yeah.
the world. In fact, it may be at the root of much of the social arrangements that are in place now. It may have resulted in the kind of oppression we see or the disharmony that we see in society, right?
But yeah, so what else is there to drive us though? I mean, I'm just thinking aloud that if I'm not self-centered, how will I achieve what I need, what I want in life? How will the group achieve what it needs? And yeah, that drive may just disappear, no, if I'm not self-centered. And then I may become fearful of being a failure or just collapsing. So what else should I have? I mean, I'm just thinking it's a natural force, self-centeredness.
That could be an assumption, right? That one will fail, one will collapse without this drive itself may be an assumption. We actually don't know what will emerge if this self-centered energy actually dissolves or it weakens in some way. We don't know what will emerge from that. Even a suggestion to question this drive may leave all of us feeling like very scared of what will become of us without this drive.
So these are all very subtle points. See, I'm just wondering who says don't be self-centered. It's normally this thing is coming from a very traditional, like religious type context, or some very other conservative context which says, no, don't be self-centered. It's very bad to be self-centered. We should all be good human beings by not being self-centered, right? But actually, I think now this question of and the problem of self-centeredness is actually coming up in many contexts, like scientific contexts, like what drives human beings to behave the way we do, or philosophical contexts, or social contexts, political contexts sometimes. Like it is, I think it's a question that's gathering momentum in my reading, and many philosophers are talking about this. And Krishnamurti has gone into this question a lot. So at this point, we thought we would project a slide, and I don't know if our viewers or listeners are familiar with Krishnamurti, so it's quite a dense passage. We'll just read it once slowly and project it as a slide also, so you can follow.
So the mind is ever seeking experience, and that experience hardens into a center. And from this center we act. We live and have our being in this center, in this accumulated, hardened experience of the past. And is it possible to live without forming this center of experience and sensation? Because it seems to me that life will then have a significance quite different from that which we now give it.
So, is it possible to live in this world without forming this center? I think it is possible only when there is a full awareness of life, an awareness in which there is no motive or choice but simple observation. I think you will find, if you will experiment with this and think about it a little deeply, that such awareness does not form a center around which experience and the reactions to experience can accumulate. Then the mind becomes astonishingly alive, creative. I think this is what most of us are really seeking, a state in which there is no conflict, a state of peace and serenity of mind. But this is not possible so long as the mind is the instrument of sensation and is ever demanding further sensation.
So we are saying that in our school, we don't have competition there isn't a system of rewards and punishments. There's a lot of space for talking things, to have dialogues, opportunities to raise questions, and these are all sensible practices in an educational environment. But still, there is no promise of a good human being, right? It's not like you take a child through this journey and at the end of it, there is this good human being.
Product.
Yeah. And all these processes, they're not like a prescription that can assure us of that goodness. So maybe what these structures do is to just help us unpack notions that we have of goodness, or even examine the framework that we have.
Yeah. So actually going back to the parents who would like a good human being at the end of the road, it seemed like a simple ask, no? But there's so much we've had to explore and can keep exploring. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you all for
Thank
a
you.
nice conversation.
Thank you.